1. The outbreak started across the road from the virology lab. The official story is that 2019 GOV began on the seafood market in Wuhan. The infected animals sold there were carriers of the virus, Chinese scientists suggested, and as a result, some unlucky buyers eventually became zero carriers of the global crisis. Firstly, the first patients of the virus have nothing to do with the market at all. They lived nearby and most likely spread the disease to people who went to the market. In addition, GOV is thought to have originated in bats and it was a seafood market. No one sold bats inside this market. Because bats, people usually don't eat in Wuhan. At the same time, many people pointed to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is just a 30-minute drive from the seafood market. If this is not enough for you, there is another laboratory that examines bats infected with coronavirus, and it is located just across the street. It is called the Wuhan Center for Disease Control and Prevention. 2. Wuhan Virology Laboratory studied volatile coronaviruses. Wuhan Disease Control Center is not just an office. Scientists in this building have been actively conducting research, including the study of coronaviruses in bats. There were many researchers in Wuhan. It was a major project for the city. The Virology Institute was very proud of it. They were at the forefront in the study of causes, and it was they who proved that the last outbreak of the virus occurred in bats. They had much contact with a huge number of sick bats. Researchers have been collecting bats infected with coronavirus since at least 2012, and they have focused on those that could spread their disease to humans. When the 2019 GOV outbreak began, there were hundreds of bats in Wuhan laboratories, and scientists studied at least 11 new strains of the virus. It was this institution that was across the road. 3. 2019 GOV is 96% equivalent to the bat virus in the Wuhan Virology Laboratory. The coronavirus, which is spreading around the world at this very moment, has been called new because it is unique. And therefore, it differs from past diseases such as acute respiratory viral infections by about 30%. Scientists compared the genetic sequence of SARS with 2019 GOV and found that they were approximately 96% similar. If the bats had the virus, then probably it was the bats of all Wuhan. This is unlikely. But 2019 GOV is very similar to the bat coronavirus strain studied at this institute. But not every bat coronavirus has this coincidence. When another laboratory compared 2019 GOV with their own bats, the closest match they could find was 88%. And these bats were not local. They were discovered in Yunnan and Zhejiang, which are 900 kilometers from Wuhan. 4. Infected bat bleeding on researcher shortly before outbreak. Imagine a bat attacking a researcher and spilling his blood on his skin. Or the fact that he came too close and received bat urine on his body. Or imagine that both of these things happened to the same person shortly before the outbreak of 2019 GOV. That is exactly what happened. According to a report by Chinese scientists Ba Tao and Lei Xiao, a researcher named Zhen Huatian described these exact experiences in an interview with the Chongjiang Times. Zhen Huatian claims that he isolated himself so as not to spread the disease, but even if he and his colleagues used all the precautions, it is possible that the virus could still leak out. One thing already confirms that people without symptoms can still be infected. And according to a recent study from Japan, people who have recovered can still carry the virus. 5. Torso fled from a Beijing laboratory twice. It is also possible that employees at the Wuhan Institute of Virology simply did not use all possible precautions. And this was not the first time that someone left a Chinese laboratory, carrying a fatal disease. This has happened before, in fact, twice in 1 month. On April 4, 2004, a graduate student working in one of Beijing's virological laboratories was diagnosed with SARS. She became infected during the study of the virus, and not knowing that she was ill, she went out in public and caused an outbreak of the disease. This is bad, but it's absolutely terrible that after 2 weeks another graduate student working in the same laboratory did the same. This is not just negligence. According to the scientist Antoine Danchin, it should be technically impossible. It is usually impossible to infect people even at the second level of imprisonment if security rules are followed, he said after the incident. This suggests that something was wrong here. There may be all the right rules in the lab, but people may not follow them. 6. The Wuhan Institute of Virology definitely had graduate students on its staff. This is confirmed because on November 18, 2019, shortly before the breakthrough, the institute posted ads asking graduate students to help study coronavirus in humans and bats. This is completely unusual, and the description in the publication is alarming. This suggests that they were particularly interested in molecular mechanisms that allow the coronavirus to hibernate for a long time without symptoms. Sounds familiar? This is one of the hallmarks of COVID-19, that people can walk around without any obvious symptoms and still spread it. For example, 322 people on the Diamond Princess cruise ship tested positive without symptoms, and there is evidence that these asymptomatic people can spread the disease. In fact, one woman confirmed that she had spread the virus to at least 5 people without showing any symptoms. 7. Researchers in laboratory recently created new coronavirus. Scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology have worked not only on drugs. They also carried out some development of their new superviruses. In 2015, 2 researchers of the institute took part in an international experiment led by the American scientist Ralph Baric, the purpose of which was the creation of a new coronavirus with the ability to infect humans. A significant part of the scientific community was outraged by this experiment. The only result of this work is creating a new, unnatural risk in the laboratory, retorted biologist Richard A. Bright when the work came out. French virologist Simon Wayne Hobson agreed with this. If the virus escapes, he warned, no one can predict the trajectory. 8. According to a controversial study from India, some aspects of 2019 Gov bear a supernatural resemblance to HIV. In full disclosure, this study received a fair degree of thoroughness. Many scientists doubted that reliable data were used, and they did everything possible to block the authors of the study from recalling their work at this stage. But although their work may be unproven, this is not a reason to make it wrong. There is little evidence to confirm it. HIV medications prove to be remarkably effective in treating this disease, and most patients show low white blood cell counts, something that doesn't happen with any other form of coronavirus. This is creepy because researchers from the Wuhan Institute of Virology worked or did research combining ARVI and the pseudo-HIV virus in bats and humans. There is no solid evidence that COVID-2019 is a human-made virus, but if scientists ever find evidence that it is, there are many reasons for concern. 9. The Communist Chinese government ordered to be silent. Specialist in infectious diseases Daniel Lucy got the opportunity to get acquainted with the documents and data that he had at his disposal when Gov broke out, and he came out of it shocked. Their official history simply makes no sense, he said. China most likely realized that the epidemic didn't arise on that seafood market in Wuhan, Lucy told the press. Perhaps he was right. Someone in Wuhan probably knew that this story did not work out even when they first announced. Even so, they had a strict order not to say anything about it. On January 2, 2020, the day after the Huanan seafood market was accused of illness, the Wuhan Institute of Virology strictly prohibited Gov 2019. Despite this, some of their scientists still spoke out. Did everything possible to remove it from the internet with the same persistence with which they use it in an attempt to stop people calling the virus Chinese virus or Wuhan flu. 10. The Chinese government toughens the safety of the biolaboratory. The biggest reaction was from President Xi Jinping. On February 14, 2020, President Xi made a speech about the need to contain 2019's. The Chinese, he said, should learn our lessons so that we can strengthen our weaknesses and close the loopholes opened by the epidemic. Although Xi was never completely frank about how these loopholes should be closed, he announced his plan to promote a new law on biosecurity in laboratories, specifically targeting biological agents that could harm national security. The next day, the Chinese Ministry of Science and Technology followed Xi's speech with a new directive entitled Instructions for Enhancing Biosecurity Management in Microbiological Laboratories that Process Advanced Viruses, such as the new coronavirus. There is only one microbiological laboratory in all of China that processes advanced viruses, such as the new coronavirus. This is the Wuhan Institute of Virology.